Well, hello and good day, and welcome to episode 2 of Where's the Balance with Kendall and Rawle. So, for those of you
Randall.
that are joining us, welcome. How are you, my friend? How are you doing today?
I am fantastic. It's been a busy couple of days, but I am good. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well. I mean, taking life as it comes and as I create it. You know, really focused on helping my family. Got some interesting news about my mom, so we're coming together this weekend to talk. Looks like my mom may have cancer and her only kidney left. So, um, part of life. She's at that age now. So, but she seems overall good. But I know she's worried. But for me, it's just more affirmation to why I came back to Toronto. So, um, but no, I'm good.
Good.
I find myself really present, staying in the now and in the moment, and not overthinking things, not thinking about things to come, or what has happened, and being stuck in whether victimhood or whatever. So yeah.
Well, and without going into details, you and I have talked about, and in other groups talked about, your calling to come back to Toronto from, the beautiful almost coast of BC, right? And just the little things that lined up, and then the big things that kind of happened. So
Yeah.
it just like it seems to keep unfolding for why you're where you were told to go.
Yeah. Exactly, that's how it feels, and so I just go with it. And I I grew up in Toronto. I love Toronto. I do, but I just don't want to live here anymore. So I came back for a purpose, for a reason. And it's funny. I was talking to a friend. She came into town to visit, and we just couldn't line things up to get together. And she was talking about how big this city is and all that. And because she's never been to a city that size. And I said, yeah, Toronto's a big city. Until you get here, you don't realize how big she is and how spread out. I mean, you have the city, the proper city, and then you have the greater
all the
Toronto area.
all the communities that kind of got absorbed over
Yeah.
really a short lifespan, right? It didn't take years and years and years, right? They're not talking 100 years in the making. We're
No.
talking 50.
50. Well, I've been in Canada 45 years, so probably 30, even that. And that's the common pattern for all big cities. New York City itself has, it's always been kind of Manhattan, and then you have the other boroughs. So all cities, go through that cycle. And something for us to maybe look forward as we move forward, because I don't know, do we need to live in cities this big anymore? Can we spread out, particularly in a land like Canada where we have so much land? Could we spread out a little bit more because of technology and
well, we're seeing that here, right? I mean, Saskatoon, right? The core of Saskatoon, between 250 and 300,000 people, right? I mean, that is not even, that's a borough of Toronto, for example, right? And we saw that here too, right? Not necessarily through the quote unquote great resignation, but just the realization that you don't have to live here, right? You don't have to live in your big centers. And in Saskatchewan, Saskatoon's one of them, to get the job done. Right. Quality internet, quality whatever, or good highway driving, there are several communities 20-30 minutes outside of the city with drastically less taxes, drastically less on a lot of things. Their services might be, a little bit sketchy in some things, but it's less. And so is it worth paying less to pay a little bit more in fuel? For some, for sure. For others, no, right?
Yeah. And to me, it's about trade-offs and what's most important. It's always a trade-off, but we don't always want to accept the trade-offs. We want this, but we want it with that, and this with that doesn't always go together.
And that's that ran through my head last night. Actually, I cat sitting for my niece. I just popped by to make sure the cat was fed and watered, and her calendar on the wall is this big like sunshine and rainbows and every day is a great day, good positive motivational quote, but it's missing that piece, right? That section of not every day is a beautiful day. Every day is beautiful,
Yes.
Right? We wake up this side of the grass, we experience the sunrise, we experience, the sunset. Every day is beautiful, but not everything about that day needs to be beautiful. And I think
Right.
we're missing that in this what's going on right now in society is that big push to like feel good, feel good, feel good, feel good, feed the dopamine and keep that rolling, and then forget about the bad and the ugly. And I'll use your good, bad, ugly, beautiful statement because we can't forget that. We that is an essence of what we do as people, as humans, as individuals. Not every day is sunshine and rainbows, and sometimes accepting the thunderstorm for what it is and just letting it go is worth that in itself is beautiful.
Well, it goes back to, as we continue with this thoughtcast, I'll bring up Thomas Sowell many times. He talks about the various visions that govern our life, the constrained versus the unconstrained vision. And there are people that look at life and they live it, or they try to change it based on what they think it should be. Right? Because life isn't fair and all these injustices and so forth. So they try to change it, as opposed to someone that recognizes, we are human, we are flawed, we're going to make mistakes. Not even people with the best intentions don't always do the right things. That's just part of our humanity. And when those things happen, you deal with them, as opposed to trying to prevent them. Because this is what we're, from my perspective, is what I'm seeing going on right now. We have the old saying, don't judge a book by its cover. Is that truth? Because you do judge a book by its cover before you pick it up. You look at it and you go, oh, that's appealing. Now, the saying should be, don't always judge a book by just its cover, because you will judge a book by its cover. The question is, will you pick it up and see what's inside?
And give it an honest chance,
Yes,
right? It's something, you get through the prologue, get through, epilogue, whichever's first, prose first. Get through that, get through chapter 1, 2, and then the realization, and I think this part's missed too, is that not every book, right? And we're gonna human book, we're talking the same language here. Not every book is interesting the moment you touch it and flip through it. And sometimes you got to put it down and you come back to it later and go, what the hell? This is a great book. Why did I not continue reading this before? Because you weren't in the right place at the right time.
In the right perspective, the right place.
Right.
You, who knows how many, depending on how long it took you to pick it up again, you've had different experiences that shifted your perspective. So, that's one of the things that I want to talk about. Well, we're talking about it now is where we are presently in our society, because on the weekend I came across this rapper, Zoby, Z-U-B-Y. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's out of the UK.
I will be right shortly.
Yeah. Well, it's a video I sent you. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did. Yeah. I watched it.
And then he came up with 20 things that he observed during the pandemic and how we came out of the pandemic. And I'm just going to read a couple of them. The first one would be rather be in the majority than most people rather be in the majority than be right. Another one was 20% of the population have strong authoritarian tendencies, which will emerge within the right conditions. Fear of death sometimes will be surpassed by the fear of social disapproval. Propaganda is just as effective today as 100 years ago, which I was glad he picked up on. It's funny, I was watching a video of Ronald Reagan gave a speech during the '68 elections, and the things he talked about and the mindset of the nation that he observed and some of the practices are the same things we're going through today. And it just reinforced my understanding that the more you understand history, the more you have a chance of not repeating it. But when you don't, you'll keep repeating it. So what's going on today in society, we're acting like it's new. And if you did some research, and it's not that long ago, we've gone through this many times. What's some of the other ones? Most people believe the government acts in their best interest, which is not true. And it's funny, Reagan was talking about that in his speech. Humans can be trained and conditioned quickly and easily to alter their behavior. Isn't that what COVID really highlighted? And why were people so quick to change their behavior? Because we've been conditioned for so long. You know, when I really look at what's been going on, the fear that seems to be so rampant in our society, you know, has that always been constant? Well, I think from the moment we came out of the caves, we've been fearful. You know, at one time we were prey as well. So we were very skittish, like our friends, the zebra, and concerned about our survival. And to some degree, we still are. I think one of the major problems on this planet is a lot of people are afraid of death. And yet it is something that's going to eventually, you know,
it's inevitable.
It's a rite of passage we all have to go through.
Absolutely.
So, you know, it's interesting seeing where we are now that we're supposedly, I don't know if we're still officially in a pandemic. I don't think we're still past COVID. Listening to the news this morning, you know, they're talking about the rise in cases and deaths and all this, and talking about still wearing masks. You know, it almost feels like they're preparing us for the fall and locking us down again because cases are on a rise.
Yeah.
And yet, at least here in Canada, we're heavily vaccinated. So, you know, watching how people reacted and how they treated each other, you know, how quickly we were ready to move back to segregation because of this fear. And not so much just the fear of death, but wanting to feel safe and secure. And we're willing to give away our freedoms. You know, so it's like,
and that safe and secure speaks to our original programming, right? That element, and then inside of that is that survive and thrive.
Yeah.
If you're not surviving, you move to thrive, right? I mean, we're just outside of the cave. Don't travel far. Don't go in the dark. Don't, right? Like all of that leads back to what we just did for 2 years and counting now, right?
Yeah. But you see, I think the problem is it's like positioning. It's like, you know, when I think back to my business days, my corporate days, when you position things properly, and when you position it with real facts and data, people tend to understand it better. Part of the problem, I think, in our society is we don't believe the officials that have been telling us things. You know, 1 minute is wear a mask, next minute masks do nothing. 1 minute you need to get vaccinated. Vaccinating is the best way to stop the spread, and yet it didn't stop the spread.
But yet, back to your 20 items, I meditated on that this morning. That's what I chose this morning to be. I just wanted to listen to him talk. I wanted to absorb, and that was never the solution. Sorry, I lost where I was going mentally with that. It was down the vaccination pathway, and that's it. In the US, and I watched, and I remember this, and I was waiting for the bad of the scenario for COVID was the whole BLM protests and movements and groups and things that were happening. And I kept looking at the news as it was popping up, and I had already disassociated from news for the most part. It was a brief couple times a week, just quick catch up stuff. And I was like, oh boy, is this where this is going to happen? Are these super spreaders? But then, I mean, he goes on to say, okay, well, they were calling Trump rallies super spreaders, but BLM wasn't. Where's the science in that? Where's the question? And even here in Canada, we had several smaller, yes, but several protests, whether it was BLM, whether it was BIPOC community, whether it was our own Indigenous community, that were gathering on the steps of legislative buildings in large groups without masks. I mean, we even go to the anti-maskers or the anti-mandates, and they were collected in large groups. Where was the population? Where was the story in that, you know, these super spreader events that maybe didn't necessarily spread anything, but brought people together for something they believed in?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things he talked about in his 20 points is how everything is politicized. And that's what this is all about. Everything has become politicized. You know, when I look at, you know, when people look at the states, you know, right here in Canada, you know, we look at how our prime minister treated the trucker protesters. And yet, a year before that, BML was allowed to run rampant, gather, and be more destructive. I don't even say the truckers were destructive, because at least the organizers in that movement, when they heard of any vandalism, they actually acted to deal with it right away, from what I saw. And, you know, one of the things I noticed is the way the media covered those two things. Right, even our prime minister was down with the protesting of BML, which to me in some cases was just downright riots. But yet the truckers, who was predominantly peaceful, they vilified. Yeah, you can't control what people show up with. So you have someone show up with a Nazi flag, and then you broad stroke everyone. Oh, it's an alt-right, it's a white supremacist kind of protest. And these are the kind of words that came from our leaders. And I find that very problematic, because why? Everything has been politicized now. And the battle lines are drawn. You have to be right or left. And I was talking to a good buddy of mine, because I mentioned to him, I've been listening a lot to Pierre. How do you say his last name again?
Poilievre?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Poilievre. So
We'll
I
go
asked
with
him,
that.
yeah, because I asked him, I said, what do you think of Pierre Poilievre? And he goes, he's a little bit too far right for me, but he's got my vote 100%. So I found that interesting. I actually emailed Pierre and told him of my concerns of Canada, how much I love this country, but my pride is slipping because I don't recognize the country anymore. This is a country I grew up in where we could ask questions. Hey, Randall, where you from? Mm-hmm. Now we're told that's somehow racist. Where people ask me the same thing somehow, well, because I'm Black, I can't be born in Canada. Or maybe they're just asking a question out of curiosity, because I do it all the time too. I ask people of all ethnicities, so where are you from? Where are your people from? Right? Because I assume everyone is from someplace else other than the natives who've been here for thousands of years. So if you're not native, everyone's a damn immigrant. Whether you've been here how many generations. So, but the point is, it's like, can't seem to talk. And because everything is politicized, battle lines are drawn, and you have to be right or left. In my own poet society, you know, there's many poets that I think identify strongly on the left. Okay. Can we still not talk? And I find that's where a lot of the problems are, because you're perceived left or right. You can't talk. As a Black man, the views that I hold are not popular with a lot of Blacks in the Black community, but that's also a lie, because the media wants you to think all Black people think the same damn way.
Well, and then they will position, and that was a great word, because that's exactly what it is. They will position the supremacy or the race or whatever, and it doesn't matter which community we're talking about. There's media out there against or for, and it's just whatever is selling the best. You know, it's the feature page of the newspaper, you know, 1950s on the corner. The kid selling the papers telling you what the big item is in the paper, because he wants to make his 20 cents.
Yeah. You know, it kind of reminds me of you know, the United States in the 40s and the 50s, when they went through the McCarthy years, where Joseph McCarthy was fighting and trying to get rid of communism, and just the blacklisting that happened, and then just the downright false accusations, and just getting people riled up because, oh, communists are coming to take over America. And, you know, it like I said, when you go back and you look at history, what we're doing is no different. But yet we somehow think that what we're doing is different, and somehow we're doing it better, or, you know, we're not the past. And I'm just fed up with the way we use our past to hinder ourselves collectively and individually. Like now, if you get into politics, you better have lived a squeaky clean life, because anything you have done that they deem to be negative, when I say they, whoever they is, the media, whoever, they will use against you. You know,
absolutely, they will. There's a good series, and I've not made it all the way through, just for timing's sake, but the first season was exactly about, and it was American, Designated Survivor. It was on Netflix. Kind of was interested in the how-tos behind the scenes, but that's exactly it. Somebody in the White House's job was to, through the vetting process of VPs and whatnot, what's on your social, what have you done, who else have you, who have you made a mistake with? Right. It didn't matter what or where. It was who else did you make a mistake with? How do we pay it to go away? What's going to pop up in the campaign that we don't know about, that we can either create an answer for or we can make it go away? So they could be anybody, but somebody's going to find it.
We're part of the they. I just find
Absolutely.
there's so much misinformation out there, lack of information. And yet, man, we live in a time with the internet, with smartphones, where we have access to so much, and yet most people just seem so ill-informed of what's really going on, or understanding some history, and they go, well, there's so much junk out there, you don't know what to cipher through. I think it always has been that way. It's just that it's more rampant now because it's in our hands.
Well, and this goes even down, let's look at weather patterns. Same concept, right? 50 years ago, we would have had no idea that South America had a 7.2 magnitude earthquake. Today, we know the moment it's begun, right? And it's not just because we have seismic centers across the globe. It's because somebody tweeted, somebody said, somebody used social media to say, this happened, this is what I'm experiencing, and everybody else.
And they have their phone making their videos and all that. That's why I say, no one thing is all good, all bad, all ugly and beautiful. And technology is a beautiful thing. And it enables us to live a life, a comfortable life. And when I say us, I'm obviously talking about where we live, because, I'm very fortunate. As much as I have concerns about this nation, I'm also grateful in the same hand. And I think that's one of the problems. We've forgotten how to be grateful, because we've villainized everything and we've politicized everything. And now this country is a villain, and how she came about and what has happened. And I don't dispute the history. When I say the history, I don't just look for good history. I accept the real history, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful. There is no perfect country on this planet. Everyone has their thing. And what I've realized is that we've all gone through the same things.
You talked briefly in there about gratitude, and that's where this was going from. And I listened to a younger child having a conversation with their parent while I was out and about this last weekend, and it became so clear to me that many individuals, and in this case it was one, but it became very clear to me that this child has never had, a parent talk about the gratefulness in the good, the bad, and the ugly of being grateful. Bad things bring gratitude because you learn other things through it. Good things, you learn other things, right? Like finding your silver lining, and not that it's like toxic positivity. What am I supposed to learn? This is a setback. What did I learn? How do I change? What do I adjust, to keep yourself moving forward? But the way this child was talking like blew my mind, and all I could think of, the very first image that came into my head was, you're behind the wheel of your car and your child's in the back seat. How do you talk? How do you respond? How do you whatever? Are you talking to them? Are you losing it on the drivers? Is there every red light, right? Like it was all of this stuff, and I'm like, that's what the up and coming is hearing from the current. But that doesn't change the history pattern, because millennials heard certain things from Gen X. Gen X learned a lot of things from the boomers. Boomers learned a lot, right? Like that history, and that's in 20, 30 year markers, right? We're not talking it's 2020 and let's look at 1940. This is 20 to 30 year markers all the way back, and the story's the same.
Well, a generation is marked, I think, by 25 years. So you're talking within even a couple of generations. I heard someone say this, past generations, their job was to fight for freedom, to set the table. And then future generations' job is to see if they can maintain it and keep it. And future generations, and the further away you move from those original generations that did that heavy lifting, what I've observed is a pattern of kind of moving away from that thinking and almost not appreciating it and vilifying it. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. I agree, but what I think is also missing in current to older existing generations, right? We're talking living presence.
Mm-hmm.
Current generation has maybe decided or figured out or chosen that the table that was set for them is the wrong shape or the wrong size or the wrong material, right? The table was set for a certain time for a certain reason. And I think that ageism, you know, oh, you millennials or oh, you boomers or what, because I hear all sides of it because I'm listening. I think we are all failing to realize that table worked in that time. For that reason, we can't forget about that table. And that table built the foundation of where we are today, but we may need to change what the table's made of. We may need to change the size or the shape of the table because we keep moving forward. If we want to change the direction or the trajectory that we are on in life, we have to look at what we were given and does it still work? If we're not willing to look at it, change it, adjust it if necessary, right? We've always done it this way because it's always worked.
Yep.
And no challenge in the statement. Well, I may want to change the table and come back to the table you've presented. Like, yep, I've experienced these other things and you're right. Your table is the best table.
I don't have a problem with changing the table. I use the analogy. How was this country started? Well, there were natives here before. Yeah, there were. And then the Europeans came over. Why did they come over? They weren't just coming for wealth. They weren't just coming, a lot of them, the early settlers was running away from oppression, running away from persecution. They came here because the new world presented an opportunity to build something different from what they were running away from.
And I mentioned this in our first episode with way my one side of my family arrived here is exactly that.
But then they come here and after a while, they build the same damn thing that they were running away from, or they practice the same things that they were running away from. And that says to me, so you can change the table all you want. The table isn't the problem. The problem, and every generation wants to change things. It's like, when a general manager in a sports team comes in, and if the old one is fired and the new one is hired, the new one will tend to always want to get rid of the old staff because he or she wants their players and people that are like-minded to think their way to help build what they're moving forward with. That's just a natural thing that happens in life, whether it's in business or in sports or anything. So I don't have a problem with the changing. What I have a problem with is we're saying we're changing it. Changing to what? Because I'm seeing the same oppression that people ran away from hundreds of years ago coming back into society today, or maybe it's always been. I was watching a very interesting documentary on the Great Depression. And the reason I really like this documentary, because it's a few years old, but they were talking to people that actually lived and experienced the Great Depression. And it was very interesting listening to people, and they interviewed men, women, Black, white, Chinese, all sorts of elders that they could find that went through the Great Depression. And the common theme was there was a shame for these elder people. They didn't blame the government. They were like, how did I allow myself to get into this position where I don't have a job, where I can't take care of my family? There's always a shame to how they got there. I didn't hear once anyone blaming the government. And then secondly, the thing I know, the common theme, and I remember when this happened, even listening to Black people that went through the Great Depression, and during that time, they were in the throes of Jim Crow and segregation, and still talking about community and how people came together to help each other out. And if you had, if you had chickens and they laid eggs, you take what you need and then you either barter or you gave it to your neighbors. And everyone, listening to Black people talk about how during that time, how certain whites came together to help. And I was just sitting there listening to these people in this documentary. Now, it's a documentary. It's a one-sided view.
Absolutely.
But we don't seem to have that today. And I could be blinded by what's going on. I do know people that do help in COVID. But there's a different mindset, because the mindset that I keep hearing is we keep wanting to blame the government. Whether when something goes bad, what do people say? Well, what's the government doing? As opposed to, what are you doing? Because one of the reasons our governments have gotten so big is because we keep saying that, well, what's the government going to do?
And we see this in large federal politics. We see this in small municipal politics. We see this in school board politics. We see this right from the top all the way to the bottom within the political circles.
Yeah.
You touched on a really good point, and I want to just go back to it for a quick second. So a friend of mine is been in Canada 10, 12 years, something like that. And originally from Pakistan, she's a single mom, has two boys, and she speaks so highly of the community component.
Right.
When back at home, and even when they go home to visit, you don't just feed yourself, you're feeding the community. The community comes together every time. And if there's somebody sick and that family needs help, you jump in and you offer it. You, like, there's rotations and night shifts and day shifts and grocery shopping, or the ability to barter or trade, but you're not even worried about the return because that person is stuck or is experiencing something that's not letting them be a part of the community in the same way that they were used to. So you're still involving them. You're just taking it to them, and they're not necessarily able to give back in that moment. But she spoke so highly of, supper time, dinner time, everybody's out, they're outside of their house, the whole community, the whole area, they're all together and they're talking and whatever. And then she, explains even post meal, they have a big walk. And now this isn't new to Europe, and some of that has come this far, right, into North America. After a meal, you go for a walk. It helps digestion, it helps everything else, but it keeps that community vibe going as well. You've just shared a meal with people, now you're having conversation. And she's like, it's not a power walk, it's a saunter. You're just out just to move and be active members of your community. Her next statement to that is, I don't see that here unless I do it. And I said, do you do it? Well, absolutely. So she lives in a little type of a complex, bunch of different townhouses and whatever in the area. She cooks all the time. They have different people coming over. If there's somebody that she knows is less fortunate and, corner or outside of a door, whatever, looking for something, that's the first thing. What can I bring you? I'm on my way home. What do you need? Do you need something hot to eat? Do you need a coffee? What do you need? I can get you something if I know what you're looking for. And she has those conversations, and that was home. That's what she grew up as, and that's what she wants her boys to learn, is that aspect. But she said, just the general kind of consensus, and we're talking, this is in Saskatchewan, right? There's not a big group of people. The general consensus is you're in it alone.
Yeah. And it's funny you said, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I always say we grew up in the hood. We didn't know we were poor. We just did. My mom always made sure we had. Single mom. My dad was there, but he was sporadic. And even then, in the 60s, because I was born in 61, so we moved to New York in 68 or something like that. So I was at the tail end of the 60s in New York. I was there, when there was a lot of protesting, a lot of, the women's rights and Black Panthers and all these things with civil rights was going on. And yet, with all the perceived racial strife, and because back then it's not what it is today. And I am not one of these people that believe Canada and America is these racist countries. I just think those things, all they do is perpetuate the race game, and it shuts down conversations. Even then, as a kid growing up, I mean, yeah, I knew racism existed. Shit. When my buddies and I would try to go fishing down at the docks, we had to go to the Italian neighborhood. And how many times they chased our asses? They go, where you niggas going? Blah, 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 and chase us, and we're on our bikes. It was almost like a game. And the same when they came through our neighborhood. It was almost like a game with us, because no one ever stopped and no one ever fought. It was just, But even during those times, and don't get me wrong, there were some really harsh things going on, there was still a feel of community. I wasn't just raised by my mom, I was raised by others in my community. You know, we had people who felt like they were looking out for you. If you did something bad and you didn't tell your mom, shit, trust me, someone saw,
Somebody knew.
and your
Oh,
mother
yeah.
would know, or they would call you on it. And it seems like today we don't do that anymore. Now it seems that way. I don't necessarily buy that, because I do believe most people are still compassionate and caring. But I also see a lot of people, even in my sister's neighborhood here, there's a lot of kids in this neighborhood, but yet you rarely see them outside playing. And I think that's because generations of young ones were raised with fear. They're fearful that your children are going to be kidnapped or something is going to happen. And these things do happen, but they don't happen as often as people as people think it does. And then when it happened, you know, when I go back and I pull up some old news clips from the 70s and 80s, and when a child went missing, the fear that they pumped into those stories would make every parent think, oh my God, you've got to lock your kids away because there's someone lurking around the corner to snatch them up. You know, our society has problems. It isn't just one thing. There's many things that has made us disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
But the common theme is, I don't fear society, but I fear our governments, because I am from the mindset that our governments don't have our best interests at heart.
Mm-hmm.
They have their own mandates to fill. Having said that, this big animal that's become the government still produces some good. But a lot of the good in our society actually doesn't come from government. It comes from us. It comes from businesses. It comes from small businesses. You know, we would like to dump on the rich, and yet the rich pays 56% of the taxes collected come from rich.
And out of that, and the federal collection and the provincial collections, if we speak Canada specifically, out of that money, so many more programs that are not for profit or community-based organization driven get to continue functioning.
And yet we dump on them because why? We don't know the full facts and all the information. And to me, that's part of the job of a government, is to provide information, not just to put it on a website, to hold town hall meetings. I'm sick and tired of these politicians talking about town hall meetings, and yet when they get into office, they don't really do it. Or if they do it, it's a one-sided conversation. One of the main reasons I think you and I are doing this is I am tired of the one-sided democracy I keep seeing.
Because democracy is not one-sided.
It's not one-sided. And it's not a fixed thing. It's something that is constantly evolving. You have to work for it. It's like citizenship. You have to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty. If you want a welcoming community, you have to be welcoming. You know, how well do you know your neighbors and people in your lives, even the people we work with? You know, we spend more time working with people, and we'll love to say, oh, you know, you're an extension of my family. Well, how well do you know these people? Do you really share? Now we're generalizing, because I know a lot of people do these things. And this is what I've always been trying to figure out, where's the disconnect? You know, if I talk to 10 people, they'll say, oh, no, I do this, I'm welcoming, blah, blah, blah. Well, if that's the case, then how have we gotten to this point?
And this brings a point.
Government.
A mentor of mine, his words that a mentor used for him, it's not what you do when I'm watching, it's what you do when I'm not, right? So and my mentor furthers the statement into, I can come and sit in your house at any time. You know, if you invite me in, I can come and sit in your house at any time. Mm-hmm. If you're going to follow all the rules and all the things, all the check boxes, you know, that we talked about as, you know, mentor to mentee type scenarios or relationships, mm-hmm. I'm going to say, hell yeah, you're doing a great job. But can you, and are you accountable to you enough to follow through with those when somebody isn't looking? And that is where the balance or the disconnect, I think, sits. You and I can have this conversation. We are back and forth. We agree and disagree on lots of different things, mm-hmm. and that's okay, because we can talk about this. Yeah. We also act like this outside of this screen, right? In our own worlds, doing our own things. We can
Yeah.
have these conversations with others who may not appreciate them from us, but we can do it because it's not about when Big Brother is watching. It's about what you do when nobody's there.
It's when the Zoom camera isn't on or when you're not online.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I use the example of going back to the early days of Upper and Lower Canada.
Mm-hmm.
There was no Canada or New France, and people forget how this country,
The
how it came
Dominion.
about, the Dominion, and the early settlers, and the native tribes they encountered, they got along quite well, right? Because they knew they needed the intel that the natives had to survive these lands. They knew that. They got along quite well. I learned that lesson when I was out in Kelowna, and I was doing I put together a talk panel on immigration in the Okanagan, and what that looked like in the early days. So I spoke to some of the elders of a couple of tribes out there, and they were telling me, yeah, early settlers and the native population of that time got along quite well. So I asked them, I go, what changed? And I remember one elder saying to me, he goes, when governments got involved.
Mm-hmm.
When government got involved.
When the King of England wanted more.
Yeah. And it's always been that way. It's when somebody feels that they know how everyone should live, and that someone usually has power
mm-hmm.
and has the might.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things, we don't want to accept in this life. Those that have the might will take advantage of those that don't.
Even if perceivably they are the smallest or the littlest part of the pie, they're working behind the scenes because they know.
Yeah, but they always are the smallest. It's funny how the minority always seems to rule the majority when it comes to this type of thing.
Yeah.
Because
you brought up a great point on the immigration, the travel, the connection that new travelers, and I'm going to use Canada, prime example. Last year, right around this time, my daughter went on a class trip to something just outside of the city, and I volunteered as a parent. I am so bloody thankful that I had the opportunity to go, the gratitude, the learning, all those bits. It was incredible. Was it a cold, rainy ass day? Absolutely. Was I not grateful for that? No, I certainly was. What I learned from this botanist, archaeologist, there's a phrase for it, I don't remember what it is. She explained the early European travelers, and most specifically, she spoke of an English group that would have traveled through this area, the connections they made for two reasons: survive, then thrive. They were learning the geographic properties, lay of the land. They were learning, they found ways to communicate. They learned lots of things. And the key, here's the most interesting part that I found out that I took from this individual with a botany background. They learned, the Europeans that were here learned from the original peoples what you could eat off a tree, what types of things came from trees, what came from the ground, how to survive without the stuff you brought, because they didn't anticipate that they were going to take months and months and months and months to travel this great big piece of land we sit on when they came from an itty bitty little piece of land, right? The second go round, and here's the interesting part, the second go round, they didn't have the same type of communication or the same type of lay of the land, eat the land, whatever, right? And where the food came from. And here, this was the kicker. The food they traveled with was actually what killed them, because the canned goods were sealed with lead, and most of his team died by lead poisoning. However, they made it the first go round because they built the relationships, learned how to communicate with an individual who doesn't speak the same language, using pictures and words and sounds and hand motions, whatever it might be. But they died the second go round because they didn't use the knowledge they got the first time.
They didn't trust the experience of the first go rounds. And that, and like I said, that's just common practice. If you go back and you look at the past civilizations, from I don't know, from the Greeks to the Romans to the Ethiopians to the Aztecs, the Incas, there's a commonality. Because those that come set the table, for others, and then the others that come tend to, that's what you did. We'll do different. Look, there are some traditions that are still true, that still work. Not everything needs to be changed and thrown out. And sometimes just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. Sometimes you should check your ego and go, you know what? That's me just being wanting to be right or to look like a star or whatever. I'm going to trust what has happened before. And there's that balance. You got to figure out that balance, because going back to one of your earlier points, the newer generations always want to make their mark, as they should. But the newer generation also needs to learn to trust some of the intel and the wisdom from those that came before.
And I think we talked about this statement in the last show, but you can't always throw out the baby and the bathwater.
You're not. I say keep the damn baby.
Always keep the baby. And even if you don't use it to the fullest of its potential, you need to know why it was there and how it got there, and you're probably coming back to it every time.
Because to me now, the baby is not a baby. The baby is now probably a teenager, and the baby is Canada. So that the teenager is now Canada. It's no longer a baby. We have established, we're here. I know many people want to decolonize and get rid of Europeans and say you're a settler and all this nonsense that just meant to end conversations, not encourage conversation. This is one of the reasons our tagline for this is the conversation continues, because I want us to have conversation. So I'm not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because the baby or the teenager is Canada, and I still love this country, but man, I have serious concerns, because what are we teaching the teenager?
So I have a question for you.
Yes.
Right. We talked about, you go back to where you came from, right? You made that statement that that's some of the conversation to the European process. So my question for you, if you had to go back, you have one place to go, right? You flow through back to New York, but you have one place to go. I want to know, would I go to Germany, right? Where my mom's family, Germany to Canada. I mean, they bounced, we talked about the religious persecution, they bounced borders, but they were German. So do I go back to Germany? Or on my dad's side, am I going back to England, Scotland? Give me a second. Am I flowing through to Italy? Am I flowing through to Burgundy, which doesn't exist anymore, right? Am I going to France? Where am I to go? Those are part of my lineage. Those are people that came together, moved, traveled, absorbed. I mean, if you look at the UK monarchy, they're not English. They came from somewhere else.
But Randall, you are white. All that doesn't matter. There's just one whiteness. So you need to go back to the land of white.
Oh, geez. So I need to go back to that tiny little country that existed way too long ago, and it's called it's not Caucasian, but it's a name. It's something. I can't remember what it. I got to go back to that with all these people. I don't want to go back there with.
But it's like me. Where would I go back? I grew up in New York, but I wasn't born there. I was born in Trinidad. So do I go back to Trinidad and Tobago, or do I even go further back? Because in my ancestry, my lineage, I have Chinese. There is white.
We're back to, you mean you're not native, just black, there's
native indigenous tribes, the Arawak that, I know we have that kind of blood. So where do I go back?
Where do any of us go? That's the point.
I don't even want to answer those questions. It's asinine. It's stupid. Go back to where you come from. I come from here. This is where I'm from now. This is where I live. I have lived in this country 45 years. And that's why I say you got small-minded people that still think that way.
That's why I asked you the question, because it's a rhetoric.
I have no desires on throwing out the baby and the teenager. What I want to do is change the water. Canada is the teenager now. And how do we help this teenager grow into a productive member of society? How do we help this teenager become the country that I think we all want? I have no desire. I have a lot of friends that have left this country already, and yet they say they love it. So that's their choice. And I don't think anything ill of them. I am not prepared to leave, nor do I want to leave. If I was to go back anywhere, I'd probably go back to Trinidad, but I've asked myself that question. Could I live in Trinidad? I haven't lived in Trinidad since I was 12.
Yeah.
There are cultural differences of every place. All I know is that I still love it here. I've had the opportunity to travel this country.
It's a
And
beautiful country to
what I
travel.
love about this country is not just the aesthetics of it, it's the people.
Mhm.
You know, and as I said to you, I sent Pierre an email
Yes.
and he responded.
That I was going to ask, and I'm sorry, we jumped
And
on to something else. That's
I
awesome.
sent it to him on Sunday, Monday morning, or Monday afternoon. I got a response from him. Now, I don't know if it was him personally
Or PR or
I would
whatever.
assume they have a social media team, but I have sent emails to our prime minister. I have emailed Aaron O'Toole. Heard nothing. Nothing. This man responded. And I was just telling him some of the things I've shared with you, my concerns for this country. I shared with him, I wrote a poem, a tribute poem for this country that maybe one day I'll read, or maybe I'll read it today before we go. Asking him to, I said, this is something I've written and maybe one day you'll want to read it. Anyway, he responded, he goes, hey, Rawle, thank you so much for your kind words and your supportive words. Because I told him, I said, I am not a conservative. I'm not a liberal. I've never voted conservative. I really have no intentions of voting until I could vet these candidates that are running, particularly when we get to the federal election.
Yep.
Keeping a close eye on the conservatives, because why? He's got my ear. I like how he talks. I love what he says, how he says it. But you know what I'm really impressed of, most importantly? He answers questions. He doesn't give runaround, at least not that I've seen. I'm so tired of these politicians when they're asked a question, a simple question. Sometimes it's a simple yes or no question, and they refuse to answer it because
or they're the waving flag. Oh,
yeah.
These people want to hear the left. These people want to hear the right.
And I think a lot of Canadians are fed up of that. So that's one of the reasons I'm liking this guy. And one of my friends go, how can you like him? He's a white guy, blah, blah, blah. I go, what the hell does that matter? What does that matter today? When are we going to stop this nonsense? Does the man make sense? Is what he's proposing make sense?
More does the person in your riding support and make sense with what he wants the party to do?
And is he believable?
Mm-hmm. And does he or does he not, and I'm back to my waving flag, does he stick to the statement, not necessarily the script, to the statement, I want or we want, and does it echo all the way through, or does he change his mind part way? This is an O'Toole problem.
Well, I don't have a problem with people changing their mind as long as you can justify and say, you know what, I've gotten this new intel, and after doing my own research and vetting this process or doing my own due diligence, whatever you want to say, I've now changed my position. I have no problems with that, because we use that too as almost as a negative thing. Well, you said this and then you change. We're allowed to change our minds, but are you changing your mind because you've done your due diligence on the topic, or are you just changing your mind because if you don't say this, you're not going to get votes?
And that's the O'Toole problem.
And this is too many people, I believe, are in government that are there for their own benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you should be there to benefit yourself, but not to the point where the country suffers.
Mm-hmm.
Or there are a lot of people in government that went in with the best of intentions, and then they ran into this big machinery called the government, where it doesn't seem like a lot get done. So I don't know. All I know is it's time for Canadians to wake up. I am hoping COVID highlighted a lot of the deficiencies that exist in our systems, in our lives. I'm hoping the truckers' protest open people's eyes that I truly believe our freedoms, I don't know if our Constitution means anything anymore. Our Prime Minister has now got legislation before the House about banning handguns. And yet we have some really strict gun policies in this land. One of the things that's going on in the States that they're not talking about, we need tighter gun laws and all this. New York and Chicago and DC have some of the strictest gun laws on the books. Then why are these places leading in murder rates? Always in the top 10 of murders in the US. And yet they have some of the, so there's things, it's just too politicized.
Well, and the left and right of that is super, it's full of lots of contrast, because if you criminalize something so hard, create so many policies and so much legislation that it becomes impossible, you create an alternative market.
Mm-hmm.
If you so you've got a whole other problem going on, and this isn't just guns, and this isn't just the war on drugs or whatever else you want to use. This goes for anything. As soon as you make it so restrictive that it's impossible to have freedom in that thing, you create an alternative market. The alternative market always figures itself out. There is always a way through it. The flip side of that is, if you decriminalize too far the other direction, you're going to have recurring problems, but in different ways, but you're going to still see it happen. We do need some rule and some order. We are human, and we share this world with 7 billion people. But if you don't have the freedom to even decide what's effective or not effective for you, your home, your city, your town, your province, your country, like if you can't make a choice on your own doorstep about how your day is going to go, you have too many restrictions, and your alternative market's going to take it over.
Well, we went through prohibition.
Yes, we did.
What did that do? It yielded the exact what you're talking about, the alternative markets.
Underground.
So the gangsters saw they saw a need, and they provided capitalism at its best.
Al Capone spent time in Saskatchewan, in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, in the tunnels. There was Chinese laundry in the tunnels, because what do? It was criminal.
It was, and I agree. And I think this is where governments have gotten, there's too much government overreach. The regulations are too much. We are a nation of laws, just like every nation on this planet. The question is, are we lawful in how we practice? Because
these come back to what you do when Big Brother's watching, and what you do when he's not.
Yeah. And, I'm sure we'll talk. I definitely would like to tackle that in the future, because I want to really talk about, our Constitution, what our Bill of Rights mean, our Charter of Rights. Are they still applicable today? Because I have serious concerns if the laws of our land still matter, because I see how our prime minister operates versus the average person. Our prime minister made downright racist remarks about anti-vaxxers. Where was the outrage? How come no one canceled him? You and I make those same comments, and there'd be a huge fallout.
Yep, absolutely.
And people wanting to cancel you. So I'm at the point I really don't give two Fs. I'm going to say what I need to say.
Absolutely.
I look at what's going on in the States right now around abortion, and we're not having the right conversations because you want to just abort. I watched a news person interviewing a woman, talking about if a woman wants to abort her child, it's her right. Okay. What happens if the child is almost at full term and they want to abort? Yep. She's going, yep, she still has that right. What about when the child is a year? And the woman was basically saying a woman could do whatever she wants because it's her child. And I'm like, really? This is where we've gotten to. So this absolute, does it go both ways or just one way? So you will fight to keep a fetus alive, but yet we won't do anything to really protect our children that are living. We will fight for a life that hasn't fully come into this world yet, but you won't fight for the ones that are actually living in this world. So I find these extremes ridiculous. I myself personally I'm not down with abortion, but I do believe in a woman's right to choose. But that also has to be limited, Because you're going to tell me you're going to abort a perfectly healthy child because you want an abortion?
Now, I think that this is a little bit more than a black and white statement.
It is.
Because, I mean, we don't know
the
situation that led to it either, right? I am 100%, if the situation that female became pregnant was not of her control, consent, whatever, that choice changes. That does not become a decision of church and state, in my opinion. If she came pregnant by means that were not of her choosing or her choice or whatever, we're talking assault, we're talking things in that realm, that's not a situation that anybody really wanted to be in, right? So we go from the black and white to the small space of gray that exists.
What you're saying is we need to take things per case.
Yes. But when we're case by case, we need to follow the same principles the whole way through.
Well, then our principles need to be stellar, because my understanding of what's going on, particularly in the states with the Supreme Court and Roe versus Wade, is the Supreme Court is not saying we should get rid of abortion. What they're saying is we don't know if this belongs at the federal level anymore. When Roe versus Wade came about, it wasn't based on science, it was based again on feelings. And the Supreme Court is saying where we are today and with the intel we have, maybe this now needs to go back to the states and let each state, based on their constituency, decide what's best for each state. They're not saying abortion is wrong. They're not saying we should get rid of it. But as soon as that document was leaked, look at the narrative that took off.
Absolutely. And this goes right down to, and I'm going to pull this from federal all the way down to like parent boards or small group boards where there is this conversation. If your bylaws, your policies, your governing documents, right? So we have constitutions or charters, we have things in place. If they were written at a time that doesn't match the time we're in, we're talking about the back to the table. If the table still fits, but the food that's on the table needs to be adjusted or reviewed to make sure that it is still good food today, we need to review that.
Yeah.
And so when you look at, especially in provincial mandates, clubs or less than municipal governments need to review their bylaws, review the procedures, review their policies, right? And we see this in business ends too. We got to update our MVV. Our MVV was written 30 years ago, and those 5 words we have on the wall don't really matter, or nobody really knows why we picked those 5 words, because they don't match us today. Or we grew, or we're double capacity, or this was written when we were
10 years ago.
Exactly.
Don't work today. So we need to adapt. This is why in the US Constitution it's called amendments. Amendments could be changed, even the Second Amendment. Now, the question is, can you sit down and have a civil conversation? Because the Second Amendment isn't just about the right to bear arms. It's about the right to bear arms to protect yourself, but also if the standing government of the day is not for fulfilling the people's needs and wants and why they were elected, it is your duty as a republic to form a militia and remove them. Now, that was in 1776. When was the US Constitution ratified? 1786, I think. Okay. Now we are at 2022. Are those things still applicable? The principle, the content of the amendment is still valid. But does
1788, by the way.
1788? Okay, I was 2 years off. I'm getting old. My memory's not what it used to be.
It's all good.
But can we have a conversation about how do we amend that? Because look, I live in a world where not everyone has the best intention. One of the reasons we have borders, because there are bad ideas out there. You take away people's guns, how are you going to protect yourself? How?
The alternative market takes over.
Because people are acting like everyone has the best intention. And yet, there's many guns out there that didn't go through normal channels. They usually or illegal.
Mhm.
So now you want to do what? There's no such thing as an assault rifle. There's automatic semi. Do we need to have some of these guns out there? Because these terminologies were created by media or created by spin doctors to produce fear. The NRA does not do a good job of really, the NRA's job is to defend the Second Amendment, and you do a piss poor job of defending it, because the narrative is they just want to take your guns. No, I don't think they want to take your guns. What they're saying is there's certain guns we need to look at. Why do we have these? But my thing is, okay, we have strict gun restrictions right here in Canada, and yet we still have shootings here. So is it the guns that are the problem, or weed are the problem, or the laws that we have? Is it mental health? There's not just one factor.
That's
We
right.
talk in such absolutes about things, and yet there are many factors that go into what's going on. And how you're going to uncover and how you're going to unpack all these things if you can't have civil discourse.
And if you're not willing to review history and the historical component of it. I mean, draw it in real close for our viewers out there, for individuals who may not see, beyond the paper or care about what the policy or the paper says. Occupational health and safety bylaws are updated annually. Even in your own home, if you build a home in 2022, your fire smoke detector is hardwired. If your house is built before a certain time frame, you have to change that battery. If your smoke alarm's really old, you're changing a D-cell battery every 6 months, right? Like we learned because something happened over here that said, whoa, we need to amend this because there's a better way. Building codes are updated all the time. Municipalities adopt them once every so many years. They adopt a specific version. These are commercial and residential codes. So people are living and breathing these amendments every day. They just don't realize it, or they're not paying attention to it because it's just the way it is. You buy a house today, these are the things it has to meet. But if you buy a house that's built in 57, like the one that I have, it's not gonna meet the same standards. Yes, we'll do upgrades, we do renos, we bring it forward because there are improvements that have made life more efficient or more safe. Yes, of course you're going to bring those forward, but we're talking big government and big policies, and I don't want people lost in the well, that doesn't apply to me. Well, it does, because we review these things all the time. We do it at work. Generally accepted accounting principles have been written in stone for way longer than any one of us can point a finger at. You and I have been in business long enough to know this. They are generally accepted because they are the baby and the bathwater. The things we move around it apply to business in the time that it's happening, and we review those too. Does this make sense anymore? Do we need to still do this? How can we improve or change, become more efficient? All of those things. And so we're amending stuff every day. We just don't necessarily look at it every day or see it that way.
I think we need to wrap this up because we're out over the hour again. Well, I figure we're going to go hour 15 every time because you and I talk, and we talk well, so I enjoyed that. And Neil was here, and he goes, you and Randall are flowing with it. He enjoyed the conversation. He had to leave so I appreciate when Neil ever shows up. I think maybe something for us to think about for the next, the third episode is maybe we talk about rights and freedoms and what those things really mean.
I like it.
Because we act like we have absolute freedoms, and I don't believe we do. The mere fact that I live on this planet with others means I don't have absolute freedom. So we need to look at the conversations we're having, because we're having this conversation. It's my God-given right. No, God didn't give you these rights. Government gave you these rights because someone sat down and write constitutions based on their faith and belief and all this nonsense. God gave you life if you believe in God.
Divine Mother, whatever
right? You want to call it.
Your life energy came from a source.
And I was born into this. Was I born free? No, because I was born through a mother. So I needed others, and that's the thing. We need each other to live this life. So I think, we'll talk about this offline, but I think our next conversation, I want us to really talk about what the rights and freedoms mean and all those things.
So before we go, I just want to let people watching know, once we get this out and post on some of our socials, we'll drop that YouTube link that Rawle and I were talking about right at the very beginning, the 20 things.
Yeah.
And he threw in a bonus one at the very end. So it's titled 20, but he gave you a 21. Just so listen all the way to the end, because it is worth it. It challenges some thoughts. It's really good.
Yeah. And he's obviously well learned and studied. I think he's a lawyer by trade, but I really like the way he thinks, and I'd love to talk with him one day in future.
Absolutely. And
I'll reach out to him and see if he would even come on and do our show with us. But one of the things, if you don't mind, I'd love to close the show with this poem that I wrote.
Absolutely, please.
At the end of the day, I am proud to be a Canadian. I wasn't born here, but I'm so grateful that I'm here. I'm grateful that my 3 children were born in this country. I'm grateful for the life that I was able to craft in this country. And I'm grateful for the many Canadians and other ethnicities, because not everyone was Canadian, that helped me along the way. The many doors that were opened to me from the moment I came into this country on December 27, 1977. I've always felt welcomed. Always. I've experienced bad and ugly in this country as well, but the good and the beautiful far outweighs the bad and the ugly. So this is why I'm one of those people that go, I'm not buying this nonsense you're saying. Like my sister, my nephew is showing some promise in football, and they're actually he has to go out to Kelowna because Team Ontario is participating in a big football jamboree out there. And thinking about flying and the cost with inflation and all that. And I said, load up the car and drive across.
It's a beautiful drive.
And she goes, oh, that's a great idea. I said, you have the time, take the time to get there and see this country, not just the physical aesthetic beauty, but the beauty of her people. You will come away with a different, every Canadian should jump in their damn car.
Ooh, I'm getting goosebumps, buddy.
Travel this country.
And when I say it's stunning, I agree. It is not just, it is so much deeper than the aesthetics of geography. It is a stunning country.
It is a stunning country, and every aspect of it, the good, bad, ugly, and beautiful. And people talk about Native people. How many people have gone to a reservation? How many people have gone into a Native household and see they operate the same way we do, the same concerns? They're not all poor, they're not all struggling. They don't all not have water. There are many that are doing well. Does not mean there aren't others that are struggling. But how many people do you know? So I wanted to read this poem. This is the one I sent to Pierre. And so, because, as a poet, you're going to get poetry from me from time to time.
Absolutely.
So I call this one Calling Forth a Nation. Our hopes and dreams soar on the wings of the great eagle, as she lays witness to our collective spirit, running wild and free like the mighty herds of buffalo and caribou. Wisdom sits on the branch of the old birch tree in the form of a snowy owl, as she stands to watch perched with guarded optimism of what lies around the bend. We are a people forged from the courage of the first peoples, who sought refuge fueled by a vision quest of a new beginning. We stand on the backs of mighty people from many nations, like the Innu, Aida, Okanagan, Nakota, Algonquin, Innu, whose sacrifice of living as strangers upon their own land laid the foundation for the French, British, Dutch, Métis. Memories of their blood, sweat, and tears flow from all the waters as all our ancestors await our awakening. Their voices echo across every valley and inlet, from every shoreline to the highest mountaintops. Across the bountiful prairies, their spirit can be seen in the magnanimous colors of the seasons to remind the people of our rich heritage that embraces the good and the bad. Whispers carry seeds of change, voice like the cold frog breathing of howling wolves whose cries haunt our memories of days gone by. Today, I call forth a nation, one where the practice is of being human, where the status quo is empathy and not fear. A new nation whose supernatural beauty is beyond mere flesh and bones, for all existence is birthed from the labor of love of our great mother. Today, I call forth a nation, a land where we ebb and flow with the energies of acceptance and respect. Our potential to live in harmony with the land lies with our ability to live in harmony with each other, to live, let live, harm no other. Today, I call forth a nation who is worthy of a better tomorrow now. A people ready to fulfill their potential, knowing the wisdom we seek lies in our past when looked upon with love. The potential that is Turtle Island lies not perched on a pedestal, for we are the pedestal on which a foundation is built. Today, I call forth a nation, a place where the diversity of her landscape is reflected by the diversity of her people. The dreams and hopes that are Canada fuels the warrior poet to battle injustice with words of inclusion and unity. Let us venture beyond time and space to see that the needs and wants of our ancestors do not differ from ours today. And the truth of their day connects to the truth of our day, for we are not separate from life. We are life. Let us dance, sing, and rejoice as we reframe the conditioning. Let the light of our love create a new affirmation of peace and prosperity. Worry not of our legacy, for it will be written based on what we do now. And in this now, let us remember the greatness of a country lies not in her government, but with her people. And as a people, let us be mindful, humble, and inviting. Be patient, kind, generous, gentle, joyous. Let us choose to be of service as we embrace in this moment of us. Our native land is Mother Earth. O Canada, our chosen home. We stand on guard for me, you, us. This is where we live. Today, I call forth a new nation.
Potent.
Thank you.
Beautiful. The imagery, just potent. Thank you.
You're welcome. I love this country, man. It's a beautiful place.
It is.
And I would hate to see us destroy it. I would hate to see us destroy it. Anyway, my friend.
Yes.
That's the news, weather, and sport for episode 2 of Where's the Balance. For those that will be listening, we thank you for the support.
Mm-hmm.
To our brothers in Open Forum, we thank them for the continued support. I used to end the inspired word with, be gentle with yourself so you can be gentle with others. But since I got to read that poem, my brother, I think you should take us home.
That was such beautiful share to take us home. Rawle and I will be back in 2 weeks, first and third Wednesdays of each month. Same bat time, same bat channel, noon Eastern, and 10 o'clock Central, I believe I currently am. We will see you back here in 2 weeks on the third Wednesday in June, where we continue the conversation.